symptoms of depression and anxiety. I'm interested in solitary pursuits and meditation. I exercise. I eat healthy foods.
Yes,
I
but
volunteer in the community.
Doctor, you've just described nearly 20% of all Americans. And I'm sure not 20% of all Americans have had near-death experiences.
Well, probably 5 to 7% have.
All right, but what about the other 15%? How do we explain that?
Well, I don't know that we have to explain it, but I can say that scientists have developed paper and pencil tests to examine the question about whether or not someone has had a childhood near-death experience, and that these paper and pencil tests predict with 95% accuracy whether or not that has happened.
Is this a scientific test, Doctor? And if so, what's the name of this test?
Well, the research was done by Dr. Melvin Morse at the University of Washington in Seattle. And he was an NIH-trained research fellow, and he never had any intention whatsoever of looking at the paranormal. But the kids, he's a pediatrician, the kids kept talking to him about their near-death experiences. So he finally got together a group of advisors to help him design some research tools, which he did, and he's done some research which has been published in peer-reviewed journals. So that's where I'm coming from. And I have the traits that he has found in childhood near-death experiencers.
But in his experiment and in his research, did he also factor in other people who had the same traits that did not have near-death experiences? Or was it strictly focused on those who had already had the experience?
He studied children who had documented death.
I see. So
in the hospital.
So all he was doing was using his test on children who had had near-death experiences. So of course he would get these results then.
Well, of course he had a control group of people that were age-matched that had been seriously ill but never had a documented death. That's how we do scientific research.
But the research that he did was strictly on children?
Yes.
All right. Now, what about in the case of adults?
The results are very similar.
All right. Now, I understand that some members of the medical and scientific community say that near-death experiences have nothing to do with out-of-body experiences, have nothing to do with paranormal type experiences, that there's an explanation for these so-called near-death experiences. So how do members of the scientific community agree to disagree on such a interesting topic?
Well, I don't think that it's as compassionate as what you said. They don't agree to disagree. Each team thinks that the other team is nuts.
That doesn't sound very professional.
Okay.
I would imagine that members of the medical community who go through the rigorous training that practitioners do, there would be a certain respect for each other's research. But having had a personal experience like yourself, how has this changed your life? How has your near-death experience pointed you to the side that they're real and they're nothing to do with the physiological shutdown of the human body?
Well, it has been an incredible comfort to me to read the accounts of other experiencers, to talk with other experiencers. One of the things that I went to MD Anderson Hospital in Houston, which is a University of Texas Cancer Center, a couple of years ago, and there was a near-death experience conference that was based solely on the scientific research. And it's well known now that the near-death experience can modify your electrical field permanently. And it was hilarious in the ladies' room, because in ladies' rooms there's always a line, because we take a little longer in there. And because it was a cancer hospital, they had those touchless paper towel dispensers, and you had to wave your hand in front of them. And what I heard again and again, and I couldn't work them with my hand, is I would have to turn to someone in the line and say, "Could someone who's not an experiencer wave their hand in front of this?" It's very common to have a change in your electrical field as a result of these.
Can this change in the electrical field be seen with, Calirian photography?
I can't answer that question.
Okay, there's a good question that we'll ask our Mr. Science Whiz when he's on next week. How do you see NDEs in all of this? There's a lot of controversy. There's those in one camp who say it's real. There are those in the other camp who say it's not real. How does one listening tonight form an opinion whether it's real or not?
Well, I think that's up to each person. When I studied the training of the remote viewers and realized it was very similar to my own training as a therapist, I looked at what the research scientists at the Stanford Research Institute came up with as an explanation for how the remote viewers could see the things that they saw. And they talked about consciousness. They talked about the limen, L-I-M-E-N. That's a barrier between consciousness and unconsciousness. And the researchers that trained the remote viewers talked about a hole or aperture in the limen that allowed unconscious material to come into the conscious mind of the experiencer, of the remote viewer, And, I believe that a similar process happens with a trained psychotherapist. I certainly experienced that myself. I came to believe that the near-death experience ripped a hole in the limen and allowed for the disorderly emergence of material that was already in the unconscious mind. So the near-death experiencer may experience unwanted and overwhelming material that disturbs him or her functioning in the family and the work for some time. It usually takes 7 years to get over a near-death experience as an adult. The near-death experiencer may have unwanted visions of past, present, and future. They may have received communications from other entities. They may know things about other people that they would prefer not to. So it fits the model of the remote viewing scientist, and except that it's disorderly because that hole in the limen wasn't preceded by being selected on the basis of your certain virtues, and then the long training process that you go through to become a remote viewer or a therapist. It just everything whips loose.
Who decides during a near-death experience whether the person comes back to life or whether they remain on the other side?
Well, sometimes the person is given the choice, and sometimes the person is made to come back. I don't have any direct memory of being made to come back, but when I was at the conference at MD Anderson, one of the speakers told the story about a man who was dragged back to his body by his uncle, and the uncle took his spirit foot and shoved the man back into his body. And I have to tell you that I laughed hysterically, and I was the only person in the auditorium. I've always been ticked off about having to come back here, and I wonder if I didn't put up a fuss about it.
Are there any similarities psychologically between a near-death experience and a dream?
Well, if you look at the criteria that the scientists started by Raymond Moody and others have set up to say whether or not it might have been a near-death experience, and I don't have that list in front of me right now, but I would say no.
I'm having a problem trying to understand then, how do you know if a near-death experience is real or whether it could be something caused by the shutdown of the physiological senses of the body due to the lack of oxygen, due to some other physiological occurrence that is happening during the operation, or if in fact it has something to do with the anesthesia. I'm getting no answers.
Well, I'm not the person to ask those questions.
But you're a doctor. You're a psychiatrist. This experience changed your life. Haven't you asked these questions?
What is important to me is that the experience changed my life. It's not important to me how you think of it, how your listeners think of it. It changed my life. It's very important to me. And it was a good thing that happened to me.
All right, Doctor, you and I have to say so long. We've run out of time, and I don't know. All I can say is thanks for not sharing. I'll be back on the other side of this commercial break alone because this guest here, Exo Nation, just bit the dust. I'll be back. Don't go away.
He walks further down the street with the brim pulled way down low. Ain't no sound but the sound of his feet. Machine guns ready to go. Are you ready?
With each new extreme weather event or terrorist act, it becomes increasingly obvious that we live in uncertain and challenging times. We all buy car insurance. Why not collapse and catastrophe insurance? Matthew Stein, an MIT-trained engineer and green builder, has written 2 outstanding books to help people prepare, plan for, and deal with everything from minor situations lasting a few days to full-on collapse. Matt's first book, When Technology Fails, is a manual for self-reliance, sustainable living, and surviving the long emergency. This massive book covers the gamut from first aid and emergency preparedness to alternative healing, renewable energy, primitive living skills, and 18th century technologies that could be critical to your comfort and survival in a long-lasting crisis. Matt's second book, When Disaster Strikes, is a comprehensive emergency preparedness handbook and survival guide. When Disaster Strikes is an essential item for every family's go bag. Both books are available at all usual sources. There's a wealth of totally free information posted at whentechfails.com, and author-signed copies may be purchased at mattstein.com. That's www.whentechfails.com and www.mattstein.com.